Yo, I just wanted to talk about this because we didn't start the recording correctly. The Kings are allegedly open to talking to De'Aaron Fox ahead of the February 6th trade deadline. I do believe it's just posturing and that he's more likely to be traded in free agency when draft capital and contracts are easier to trade. Before the season, Fox turned down a 3-year, $165 million extension with the Kings. He said that he loves Sacramento but wants to win. In December, Rich Paul, his agent, met with the Kings front office and they talked about Fox's future. They fired Mike Brown and Doug Christie was elevated to interim head coach. They're currently in the 10th seed and allegedly the San Antonio Spurs are his preferred destination. Now, he's averaging 25 points, 5 rebounds, 6.5 assists, 37 minutes a night in 43 games. In 2023, he was an All-Star and an All-NBA team member. Now, one of my buddies who's a media member in LA was talking with a buddy who told him that allegedly Mr. De'Aaron Fox is a guy that is good friends, or his wife is good friends with Harrison Barnes' wife. And that's been since Barnes' time with Sacramento. And since the summertime, De'Aaron Fox has been eyeing real estate in Texas, specifically in San Antonio. And yes, he does like both the Clippers and Lakers, but he understands that the cap situation makes those moves too tough. However, Rich Paul is trying to see if he can make something happen. Bradley Beal is allegedly open to waiving his no-trade clause for Sacramento. While I like Fox, I understand if the Sacramento Kings believe that they aren't a contender with him taking up 30% of the salary cap. It's not that he doesn't lift his teammates up, but I just think he can't. When you have that hefty of a paycheck, it would financially restrict them, just like what happened to the Washington Wizards with Bradley Beal, John Wall, and Otto Porter Jr. And we see that the Kings are gearing up trade discussions for De'Aaron Fox ahead of next week's trade deadline. Yes, he's attracting interest from multiple teams. Fox wants to go, it seems, either Texas or somewhere else. And if he doesn't go where he desires, he plans on hitting free agency in 2026. James Ham, a Kings beat reporter, mentioned this even before Charania. Fox is open to extending his contract only with the Kings or Spurs. Other teams would have to play the waiting game, meaning he'd go test free agency. After rejecting a max extension last season, he could sign a 4-year, $229 million deal, or if he gets an All-NBA team appearance, that'd go to a 5-year, $345 million deal. Now, we said that the Lakers and Clippers aren't his preferred destination, and frankly, if they wanted to trade for him, they probably don't have the assets to secure him if they wanted to. Personally, I think that if you look at this, De'Aaron Fox is a solid all-around point guard, top 5 player at his position. I think a dark horse team is Miami. Imagine Bradley Beal, who's earning $50.2 million, goes to Sacramento. In return, Miami would acquire De'Aaron Fox, who makes $34.8 million, Trey Lyles on an expiring $8 million deal, and Colby Jones, who comes in via trade exception and still has 2 years remaining on his deal, with 2.1 being this year's salary. They'd also probably get 1 or 2 of the first round picks from the Suns, as Jimmy Butler would go to Phoenix, and they would salary dump Josh Richardson, who's been out for all but 8 games due to a heel injury, and he's on a veteran minimum contract that doesn't impact the cap, and they probably just would waive him and sign somebody else. So I think this would provide a little bit of everything for all teams involved. I mean, by the way, Colby Jones is averaging 19, 6, and 4 in the G while shooting like 46 and I think like 35 from 3. So to me, we know that the San Antonio Spurs are the preferred destination for De'Aaron Fox, as the other teams, the Houston Rockets, Orlando Magic, and the Clippers, are all reportedly having interest in him. I think this is just more of a posturing situation if I had to choose and say so. Waiving the no trade clause and going to Sacramento. So if Bradley Beal's open to going to Sacramento, Bradley Beal $50.2 million, De'Aaron Fox making $34 million, with Trey Lyles and Colby Jones. Trey Lyles isn't expiring on $8 million. Colby Jones is a second-year player who kind of in the same vein of a Josh Hart coming out of college, who in the G League right now is someone who's averaged 19, 6, and 4 between the two seasons on 46 and 35, 46 field, 35 3-point. So a young guy for the Heat, and maybe one or two of the first round picks that the Suns got from the Jazz. And then the Suns obviously get themselves Jimmy Butler and Josh Richardson, who's on a veteran minimum contract, which means that it doesn't count against the salary cap. And he has this heel injury that has kept him out for all but 8 games. So they would just buy him out or just waive him and open up a roster spot. So I think that's one that could actually work out. It's pretty easy to do. You could also, by the way, if you didn't want to trade the Trey Lyles, Colby Jones combination, you could just do Kevin Huerter and have, I believe the Heat would have to trade both Alec Burks and Josh Richardson, because then that's like $53 million, and De'Aaron Fox and Kevin Huerter's about 51. So that you can also do it with Kevin Huerter if you rather. You assume they want Trey Lyles if they were going to do a deal like that, due to the fact that this is a team that wants cap flexibility. So that's one. I really do think that the Spurs, who are the best team in terms of positioning themselves to get a player of De'Aaron Fox's caliber, as yes, Doug Christie's done a good job of righting the ship. I think the roster's flawed to begin with. And De'Aaron Fox is someone who the earliest he'll be a free agent is in 2026. He's averaged 25 points, 5 rebounds, 6.5 assists, and he's made an All-NBA and an All-Star team before this year, both in 2023. Now, I believe looking at the situation, it's just a bit more than people are thinking. I don't think they're pressed to make the deal right now. They're probably putting him out there because he's peak value. So if he's peak value, they probably can get more on their dollar than they would if they waited later. So to me, I think the biggest thing is that if they can go ahead and get themselves a guy like De'Aaron Fox in the Heat, with the Heat in exchange for Jimmy Butler instead of Bradley Beal, I'd rather have De'Aaron Fox than Zach LaVine or Bradley Beal. So I think De'Aaron Fox is the one player that fits the mold of what the Heat would want in terms of a player that is on long-term money that they would want. Now, like I mentioned a few seconds ago, the Spurs have the draft picks, the assets to go ahead and get themselves De'Aaron Fox if they really wanted to. And if this were to be done, Bradley Beal, like I said, would have to be truly willing to waive his no trade clause like it's alleged that he is. Now, that's kind of everything we have on the De'Aaron Fox situation. I do think it's an interesting one when you look at it from the inside looking in. I think they would like to trade him now if they want to pull the rip plug on the season and tank. But I think it's more they're going to probably trade him in the offseason. So we're going to move ahead and talk about the other news that is going on in the NBA. And I think with the current situation of Jimmy Butler, Jimmy is suspended indefinitely. And I think the biggest thing is that him being suspended indefinitely means that they are more than willing to make him be moved. I don't know why that came off weird, but what I'm trying to say is that they just trying to get this guy off the roster. They want him out of town. And I really, really think that he's somebody that's going to go ahead and get sold for cheaper than what we think. I don't think there's going to be as many picks. I think picks have so much value. And the reason I bring this is Minnesota has interest in Jimmy, and Jimmy has interest in going to Minnesota. So with that being said, I think if it is true that there's a reunion going to be there and that the Heat have interest in Julius Randle, this would be a rather easy but hard trade to do, because if you look at the numbers, it's going to have to include either Naz Reid or a combination of Mike Conley and bottom of the roster salary, or Dante DiVincenzo. And it's very interesting to look at, because I personally think when you look at the Jimmy Butler situation, I wanted to give it the benefit of the doubt. Always look at the glass half full instead of half empty. But he tanked his value by, it wasn't the holding out of trade, but it was just the behavior and just driving the wedge between the team and management, it seems. And he's a guy who's had a good season, 17 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists through 25 games, about a steal a night on 54% from the field and 36% from 3. And he gets to the free throw line. Yeah, he's not really taking threes anymore, about like 1.5 a game. And Julius Randle, on paper, the stats aren't terrible. 19 points in 33 minutes a night, shooting 46% from the field, and from 3 shooting about 33% on 5 attempts a night, and dishing out 4.5 assists with almost a steal a game and 7.5 rebounds. So he's someone that is producing, but it's not a good fit out there. Yeah, it's gotten better over the stretches of game. Same thing with Dante DiVincenzo. He's looking really well. But with Jimmy looking for another contract and making a fuss and refusing to play ball unless the new team offers him an extension, I think a general manager of any team would either look at this as a rental or just try to take away whatever leverage the Heat have. And that's where you see Tim Conley of the Minnesota Timberwolves, a guy who's willing to wheel and deal, maybe actually be looking at a swap or some sort of deal of Julius Randle for Jimmy Butler. And again, the deal would have to be Joe Ingles, Dante DiVincenzo, and Julius Randle to do the deal the easiest way. The easiest way would actually probably be Naz Reid and Julius Randle, but I don't think anybody would want to do that. It's just really hard to get that deal done. But as we said, Jimmy Butler would be a better fit than Julius Randle. Julius Randle, in theory, would fit next to Bam Adebayo and Khalil Ware. Obviously not at the same time. That's one just to think about. I think it's interesting. I think that's just people floating things out to float things out, because why would the Timberwolves, even though this season hasn't gone according to plan, it's looked better as of late, give up that many players for Jimmy who may or may not stay? I think that's the biggest thing. And yeah, I think that's my whole gripe with that one. So let's talk about the next team that potentially could be in these Jimmy Butler sweepstakes. Now, let me respond to some of these comments. What's up, guys? Yeah, Bradley Beal really is smiling with that no trade clause. And yeah, I haven't been going live in a while due to the fact that I'm doing my PhD. I'm in my second semester. I'm also being a teacher assistant, and I have been giving credentials to cover like the Miami Heat, so I have limited time. Also, I'm using a Rode Podcaster microphone. Does it sound good? I've like finally figured out how to like get better with my audio equipment at times. I feel like I've been such a noob for someone who's actually really good at technology. But either way, let's get to it and talk about the other team that has reemerged. Ooh, that does not look good. But that is, of course, Jimmy Butler and the Golden State Warriors. We know this one has been talked about. People have wanted it to come to a reality. And the one thing with it is that Allegedly, the Warriors don't want to go fully all in, and Curry doesn't want them to bankrupt themselves. Personally, I believe you got to be like the Los Angeles Rams and say F them picks, push the chips to the middle of the table. I don't deal with ifs and buts, only absolutes, you know. And Charania said that allegedly, besides the Phoenix Suns, the Golden State Warriors are the team that have been negotiating with Miami Heat. Now the price tag for Butler has been lower, but it still is shorter contracts with draft assets unless it's a really good player. To me, when we look at this, I think it's a bit annoying, as we know the Heat are optimistic about getting a deal done, and the Heat have felt that they should receive an extra incentive if they take back any players with long-term money that run past the 25-26 season, and that if they are taking back salary that goes past that, it has to be for an all-star or else. And the Heat are positioned to have more than $80 million in cap space in 2026 when several all-stars are going to be available. While most superstars don't reach free agency in the era of the extensions and the trade, but similar to the 76ers this past offseason, and I've said it lately, the NBA is about to have a very similar free agency period to like the NFL and MLB, where like teams will position themselves to have cap flexibility to like retool annually. And Windhorst spoke about the extent of Butler's feud, and before that he talked about the Heat having reduced what it would acquire to get Butler, that teams are now expected to enter the bidding process that aren't named the Phoenix Suns, those being the Golden State Warriors. And allegedly the Rockets and Mavericks could be dark horses. We know the Grizzlies are allegedly somebody he doesn't want to go to. I don't think the Rockets or Mavericks are going to do it either. So just to play around with this exercise, as we always do, I think the Fanspo trade machine would give us a great idea of what a trade could look like. And to me, I think if we're going to go ahead and talk about a Jimmy Butler to Golden State, I think the easiest thing to do is to acknowledge that this is a team that should give up any players they don't want to pay, or any players they don't see being a part of the next 2 years. I think they should understand that the two eras timeline of Jonathan Kuminga, James Wiseman, and Moses Moody did not work. Yeah, two of those guys are still there, but it didn't work. It did not work. And I get it. I get that people want to see it through and understand that people take a while to develop. But to me, it's just, if the rule of insanity is to keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. And it's starting to feel like that ever since they won the championship. They've gone ahead and just kept the same team. I really, really do think that at this point, they need to go ahead and try to make a move or something to put themselves in a position to have another guy. And they got lucky that Andrew Wiggins turned into Maple Jordan for that playoff run and everybody was great, but it's not enough. It's not enough. And I also like that Fanspo added the first and second apron spaces. They've added a little bit more stuff to this, which makes it a bit more enjoyable. Now, looking here, the contracts you'd have to do, Kevon Looney and Gary Payton with Jonathan Kuminga, I believe gets you already $24 million. Now, the easiest way to go from here would just be throw in Andrew Wiggins and you could take off Kuminga, and the deal would be built around Wiggins, Gary Payton, Kevon Looney. This is like the most basic deal you'll probably see. And what it says, they still need to cut $4.3 million. So as I said, Guy Saunders has been playing really well, and Lindy Waters seems like somebody that they like. And with that being said, unless this is where I'm kind of hell-bent, would they rather have Kyle Anderson or Jonathan Kuminga? I think in a deal like this, if they throw in Kuminga, they'll be like, well, we'll give up less picks, and maybe they just give up the 2025 pick and a couple second rounders. That's could be something realistic. And you have a team like the Heat attach both Alec Burks and Josh Richardson, who are both on minimums, which would then allow you to do a deal that looks like this. And this deal right here, I don't know if you guys agree with it, but Josh Richardson would be bought out. You would then convert one of your two ways, or you'd sign somebody in free agency, maybe bring Lonnie Walker back. And the Heat walk away with Jonathan Kuminga, Kevon Looney, Gary Payton, Andrew Wiggins, 2 second-round picks, and a first-round pick. And if they want, they can just sign and trade a guy like Jonathan Kuminga in the offseason. I think that's one that can go ahead and be very easy to do. So that's one that I find interesting, and the likelihood of it, maybe not. I think it all depends on how desperate or willing the Golden State Warriors are to move on from their players, because they've seemed very reluctant. Now, by the way, Van Lee, I'm the first one ever born in America, but my father was born in Pescara, Italy, same place where Simone Fontecchio is from, but my grandfather was born in Skopje, Yugoslavia in like 1916, and was raised in Belgrade, Serbia now, but in Yugoslavia. But my family also, like my grandfather's cousin was the chief rabbi of Turkey, so and also the Ottoman Empire. So I'm like, and then my family, because the 1496 diaspora, because I'm a Sephardic Jew, goes back to the Iberian Peninsula, and my mom's from Argentina, and she's also Basque French. So I'm a mutt. I'm a little bit of everything, if we had to say so. But let's talk about the fact that Mark Stein, you guys put up here, Mark Stein, Jimmy Butler. We've done everybody else regarding the Jimmy Butler trades, so why not go ahead and talk about the fact that the Bucks have finally come to terms with Chris Middleton is not going to be the guy he used to be. No offense, but I think they did him a solid, and they were willing to wait 18 months for his lower body to heal. The lower body did not heal, and as a result, I think they're doing their due diligence and shopping and looking for what they could do. And Mark Stein put out a report saying that besides the suitors we've spoken about, the Milwaukee Bucks are allegedly interested in Jimmy Butler. Now, one thing I think about Jimmy Butler going there is this team is allegedly connected to Zach LaVine and may or may not be connected to Bradley Beal. Chris Haynes says there's no connection, and I don't blame him. If I had a no trade clause, I'm not going to Milwaukee. However, I wonder if I were the Bucks, if I had to choose between Butler and Zach LaVine. I feel like Zach LaVine might be cheaper to get and a better fit for this team. Now, I think one of the interesting things is that this is a squad that would go ahead and be able to make a competitive offer. What do I mean by that? So right here, this was the last trade we did, but let's go ahead and do the Bucks. So it's $48.7 million. The Bucks would have to make this a 3-team trade so they could get under the salary cap. We've talked about it in the past. Either if you're a second apron team, you can make a trade prior and get under the second apron and then expand that trade and make a second transaction that allows you to make deals that you weren't able to do as a second apron team, or you can aggregate players as a second apron team if the resulting trade leads to you being under the second apron. I think everybody can agree that that makes sense. Now, the people that they're shopping, Bobby Portis and Pat Connaughton and Chris Middleton. Chris Middleton would be salary dumped to the Pistons from the Bucks. Jimmy goes to the Bucks. Bobby Portis, Chris Middleton head to the Heat. The Heat end up saving $4 million in cap space. And if you really wanted to say that, throw somebody as just salary filler to the Heat from the Pistons, I would love Simone Fontecchio ending up here. Seriously, if they could get themselves Simone Fontecchio, that would be so cool. I think that would be really cool. But yeah, straight up, this is the easiest way to do this trade, just to show you guys Jimmy Butler and the rest of the squad. I think it pretty easy. And Bucks sending Chris Middleton to the Glue Factory. Oh, look. Dude, people are so upset when you bring up that Chris Middleton. I think it's obvious. I thought last year it was apparent, but this year it's even more apparent. He's not even on the floor. I wonder if the Heat can just do this and then just say, just take Al Burks and Josh Richardson off our hands. The Bucks. Obviously, you guys can assume there'd be draft capital included. I just try not to get into the minutia of draft capital, as people, it becomes so, it's just annoying in terms of, some people don't like that you gave up too many second round picks or that or this. So we tried to stay out of it just for the sake of keeping everybody happy. You can put in the picks that you want to imagine. And this is upsetting. The Simone Fontecchio trade that I would want them to do, and it is not allowable by $333,000. But if they could walk away with Simone Fontecchio, the Heat, that would be the trade of the century. As I do believe that Simone Fontecchio is someone that is mad underrated. I hate how underrated Simone Fontecchio is. There needs to be more representation for Simone Fontecchio on this planet. I just want to beat the drum on that one. But with that being said, I think if we can go ahead and decide that Chris Middleton's being put there, people are like, well, he's on a deal that has another year on it that pays him $30 million. Becomes an expiring contract so they can flip in the offseason. Plus, Bobby Portis is a six man who kind of fits what the Heat would need. It's really an easy deal that fits everybody. Everybody involved becomes, I think, happy off of this deal. So that's part of the reason why I think something along the lines like that could work out. Is it the best deal possible? No, but I think it would give them the ability to have flexibility past this season, and you don't end up uncompensated. I've always said the worst thing that you can do as an NBA team is lose a player uncompensated. Why? Because you just let the guy walk. Now, let's go ahead and talk about, what's going on, guys? And today we got to talk about a report coming from 98.7 Phoenix, Arizona radio, John Gambarado, I believe it is, right here saying that both Memphis and Milwaukee are having discussion, the Milwaukee Bucks and the Memphis Grizzlies, with the Miami Heat for a Jimmy Butler trade. I don't know why I struggle to say that. We're going to start off with the Milwaukee Bucks trade because a lot of you are going to be thinking, well, they're a second apron team. How would they even be able to do such a trade? And it's actually a lot more feasible than you would think. So before we start today's video, I want to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section down below. Hit that like and subscribe button for more content like this, and go check out my work at hoopshype.com and follow me on Twitter or Blue Sky, whatever you use nowadays. Now, let's start off, as I said, with the one that you guys probably want to hear. How do the Milwaukee Bucks get a guy like Jimmy Butler? Because the Grizzlies, it's easy enough. They have a bunch of salary filler contracts and assets that they can get it done. For the Milwaukee Bucks, it's navigating the second apron. It has to be 2 trades. It's technically a 3-team trade. That's how they would report it. But step 1 would be the Bucks sending Pat Connaughton, who's averaging like 5 points, 37% from 3, and a 2nd-round pick to Detroit. That would clear $9.4 million on their salary cap, which would get them below the second apron, which then would allow them to aggregate players in a trade. They just can't take back more money. They have to take back less money. So by doing the first trade, sending Pat Connaughton there, they're able to now get themselves a second trade, which would be the Bucks trading Chris Middleton, who people were like, well, Chris Middleton's all hurt and stuff, and the Heat don't want long-term money. Look, worst comes to worst, Chris Middleton plays out this season and he isn't healthy. They buy him out and they get him. He's off the books by 2026. Bobby Portis, who would fit for the team, and then Marjon Beauchamp, he's got his 4th-year option declined. He could be a reclamation project, and a 2031 first-round pick to Miami. That would be how the Bucks would get themselves the deal. That's how it would work. That's what it looks like. And then Josh Richardson as a trade sweetener. I think Alec Burks could also be another one. But the reason for this is Butler would obviously form a big 3 with the 32 point per game score, 12 rebounds a night that Giannis Antetokounmpo is getting. Damian Lillard is averaging 25, 7.5 assists, and he's shooting 55% from the field, 65% true shooting. And Middleton, when he's played, has only averaged 13 points, 44% from the field. And so far, Jimmy Butler this season. Brandon Ingram. It feels like forever that Brandon Ingram was traded there. And for a while, Brandon Ingram was the leader of this team because Zion was always hurt and he was the reliable guy. Last year or so, opinion on that kind of flipped. Injuries and inconsistencies haven't done him any favors. Now, Mark Stein of the Stein Lions reporting that the Raptors could be interested in Brandon Ingram. And if you're wondering why would the Raptors be interested in Brandon Ingram, I think it's more so the fact that I think the Raptors might have something that the Pelicans have interest in that they might want to acquire for next season. Or they know that Brandon Ingram's leaving. I told you guys earlier, got some media buddies in California, specifically LA. One of them was recently at a game and he was just telling me, I'm not going to tell you who and who we're talking, but they were talking about Brandon Ingram's future, and they're pretty relevant people to Brandon Ingram's future. Basically what they said was it's probably going to be a sign and trade in the offseason. He's going to probably play out the rest of the year and get signed and traded somewhere else to a team that wants to pay him. A, there's not many teams in free agency with the salary cap to sign him that are worth signing. B, teams have more flexibility and access to draft capital in the offseason than they do right now to trade for Brandon Ingram in a sign and trade situation. So with those 2 factors being accounted for, the Toronto Raptors are emerging as suitors for Brandon Ingram, according to Mark Stein. And I find that interesting because Ingram's been on the block since the offseason, and Ingram and the Pelicans have discussed an extension, but they are apart. Ingram is in the final season of his contract. He's getting paid $36 million. The Pelicans are willing to give him a raise. They thought a raise would be $40 million a year. He wants a max. Masai Ujiri is motivated to quickly end this rebuild and get the Raptors back to the playoffs. as the Raptors reset their team last year when they traded OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam for a combination of players that resulted in RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, ending up in Toronto. You can throw in Kelly Olynyk in there. And the Raptors have been talking about other players, Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, Chris Boucher, and Davion Mitchell in trades. So Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk packaged together would get the deal done very easily for the Raptors, and they probably wouldn't have to give up very minimal draft capital. In trading for Ingram now, the Raptors would get themselves a proven scorer next to Scotty Barnes, which is something they've been reported to want to do, while also still effectively maintaining a good probability of landing a top 10 pick in this year's draft that could give them a good role player, and they could go into next season having a starting lineup of Jakob Poeltl, Brandon Ingram, Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickley, and RJ Barrett with Grady Dick and Ochai Agbaji, whoever they draft in the top 10, if they keep Chris Boucher or Davion Mitchell. All things that I think that would very much interest the Raptors. Now let's go ahead and just show you guys what that trade would look like. I think it's definitely interesting as the Raptors could really get themselves Brandon Ingram for cheap. But again, if they are being lowballed, I would rather just be the Pelicans and just, hey, if you're just trying to offer me pennies on the dollar and I have to take the risk of losing him or getting pennies on the dollar, just getting deals that I don't want, maybe just go into the sign and trade, like go take risk going into the free agency and looking for that sign and trade that may or may not be there instead of just taking a deal you don't like. That is something you can do. But again, I think Brandon Ingram, Bruce Brown, I would love Jakob Poeltl to go to the Pelicans, but that's not happening. Kelly Olynyk, it makes sense. If you didn't want Kelly Olynyk, you could do Chris Boucher, but Kelly Olynyk just makes sense. You could then probably say like a first round pick. So in this situation, they have Indiana's 2026 top 4 protected. And there you go. The Raptors are $8.9 million under, and they only increased by $200,000 in salary, while the Pelicans saved $200,000 in salary, and they're both hard capped at the first apron, but still have space of $4 million of first apron space and 10.8. So it's barely affects the team's salary. You give up a pick that's not going to affect you. I don't see another deal that makes any sense for the Raptors to do. Like, you're not trading anybody else on this roster. Like I said, the only other person that makes sense is Chris Boucher, but you're just giving them cap flexibility, and if they wanted, they could maybe expand this deal to a bigger one, and you send Bruce Brown somewhere else to a team that maybe has more interest or more willingness to resign or trade, or not trade, but I guess give up assets for him and then keep him, or a team like the Nets who will buy him out. That's always something. So that's one that I think is interesting. What do you guys think? Also, I don't know how that happened. I pressed the wrong button. Now, what do you guys think with the trade deadline being officially 8 days? I guess it's a week, but like we're going to go 8 days from occurring. I think we're in a position where, yeah, it's going to be either really boring or exciting. I just am wondering if De'Aaron Fox will get traded. That's the one. I think Jimmy's the only guy for sure. Yeah, what I find the most interesting about the whole Jimmy situation is like Jimmy Butler, by the way, guys, is not, and we already said it once, but he's not going to be bringing in the haul that people might be thinking that he would typically, just because of the way everything's played out. People know that the Heat don't have as much leverage and that they're trying to move off of this sooner rather than later. So to me, I just think if you're a team, you know that the closer you get to February 6th, the more desperate they'll get. And yeah, I'm very curious. And wow, they're doing a 2-day draft again. I honestly thought it was a failure, so I'm surprised that they're doing it again. Now, outside of that, I don't have anything else to really report on that we could talk about. I feel like we talked about everything else that occurred. Okay, so allegedly now Bradley Beal will not waive his no trade clause to go to Chicago. So that one has also been put out, and that's definitely interesting. You would think that Chicago would have worked out. Billy Donovan was his college coach, and it's kind of a situation where you think he could just rehabilitate his image and maybe be viewed as a more valuable player, and kind of like Zach LaVine did. But I also don't know how much all of this stuff is true that we're hearing about Bradley Beal, because a lot of it is what we've said, posturing.